The crystalline chamber stretched out before Jiwoo Lee like a cathedral made of frozen starlight. She had been standing in the defendant's circle for 3 hours now, listening to species after species condemn humanity. Her feet hurt, but she kept her face calm and neutral. Around her, representatives from 847 different worlds sat in their designated seats, their various forms creating a bizarre gallery of the galaxy's diversity. The Trilaxian ambassador slammed his scaled fist on the podium, making the translation devices crackle. His voice boomed through the chamber in 1,000 different languages simultaneously. He was listing humanity's crimes again, the same accusations he had been repeating for the last hour. Aggressive expansion into protected zones, violation of the Concordat treaties, unauthorized military buildup, threatening peaceful neighbors. The list went on and on. Jiwoo glanced at her 2 companions. Captain Hansol Kim stood to her right, his military uniform crisp despite the long hours. He caught her eye and gave the tiniest shrug, his expression somewhere between bored and amused. On her left, Dr. Yuna Park was taking notes on her datapad, occasionally raising her eyebrows at particularly outrageous claims. Yuna had spent 15 years studying galactic cultures and had warned Jiwoo that this day would come. The chamber fell silent as the Grand Arbiter rose from the central throne. He was a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering force field, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 6 centuries of galactic law. The evidence has been presented. The Council has deliberated. Humanity stands accused of 43 violations of galactic peace accords. The sentence is clear and has been applied to other aggressive species in the past. You will surrender all military vessels to Council authority. You will accept protectorate status under the Trilaxian Empire. Your colonies will be redistributed. Your homeworld will be monitored. You have 1 planetary rotation to accept these terms. The Arbiter paused, his energy field pulsing with what might have been satisfaction. This is mercy. This is justice. This is how we maintain peace in the galaxy. Do you accept? Jiwoo felt the weight of every eye in the chamber upon her. She knew what they expected. She had studied the records. 43 other species had stood in this exact spot over the past 600 years. 43 species had heard these same accusations, received this same sentence, and all 43 had accepted immediately, grateful that they were being allowed to survive at all. She took a slow breath and stepped forward. The gesture activated the speaker's field, amplifying her voice throughout the massive chamber. For a moment she said nothing, just looked around at the assembled representatives. Some appeared bored, others satisfied. A few seemed almost sympathetic. None of them expected what came next. No, Jiwoo said clearly. The word hung in the air for exactly 3 seconds. Then the chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives jumped from their seats. The translation devices went haywire as hundreds of species began shouting at once. The Trilaxian ambassador's scales flushed dark purple with rage. Several smaller species cowered in their seats, clearly terrified that they were witnessing something unprecedented. The Grand Arbiter's energy field flared bright red. Silence, he roared, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. The chamber fell quiet again, but it was a shocked, trembling quiet. You dare refuse the Council's mercy? You understand what this means? Jiwoo nodded slowly. We understand perfectly. We decline your ultimatum. We will not surrender our ships. We will not accept protectorate status. We will not be ruled by the Trilaxian Empire or anyone else. The answer is no. Hansol moved to stand beside her, and Yuna did the same a moment later. The 3 humans faced the entire Galactic Council without flinching. A counselor from the Vexian Collective stood up, her crystalline body chiming with agitation. This is madness! No species refuses the Council. You are barely 300 years into space travel. You have 67 colony worlds. The Trilaxian Empire alone has 14,000 systems. You cannot possibly believe you can stand against us. We don't believe anything, Hansol said, his voice flat and professional. We know what we can do, and we know what we won't do. We won't surrender. We won't bow. We won't negotiate away our freedom because you've manufactured evidence to justify your protection racket. The chamber exploded again. This time the Grand Arbiter didn't even try to restore order. Jiwoo watched as counselors argued with each other, as accusations flew back and forth, as centuries of careful diplomatic protocol shattered like glass. She had expected this reaction. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for 5 years, ever since they discovered what the Council really was. It had started with a deep space probe that picked up an encrypted transmission. Una and her team had spent months decoding it. What they found was damning. The Galactic Council wasn't a peacekeeping body. It was an extortion scheme. They identified promising young species, fabricated evidence of aggression, then forced them into protectorate status. The protector species then exploited the new subjects for resources, labor, and territory. It had been going on for centuries, and it was all documented in that single transmission. The Trilaxian ambassador finally managed to make himself heard over the chaos. "You have made your choice, humans. The Council will not tolerate this defiance. You will be taught the price of refusing our generous offer." Jiwoo smiled then, and it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone holding 4 aces in a poker game. "We've learned a lot about the galaxy in the past 300 years. We've learned about your laws, your customs, your protocols. But we've also learned about your weaknesses, your corruption, and your lies. You picked the wrong species to threaten." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small data chip. "This contains evidence of every protection racket the Council has run for the past 200 years. Every fabricated accusation, every forced surrender, every exploited species. We've already transmitted copies to every independent news network in the galaxy. By tomorrow, everyone will know what you really are." The Grand Arbiter's energy field flickered uncertainly. Around the chamber, counselors who had been shouting began to fall silent. Some looked angry. Others looked afraid. A few looked calculating, clearly wondering how this revelation would affect their own positions. Jiwoo turned to leave, and Han-Sol and Yuna followed her. As they walked toward the exit, her voice echoed one more time through the chamber. "We came here to give you a chance to do the right thing. To negotiate as equals. You chose to threaten us instead. Now you'll learn what happens when you threaten humanity. We don't surrender. We don't kneel. And we definitely don't negotiate with tyrants." The door sealed behind them with a sound like thunder. Admiral Dae-Jung Choi stood on the bridge of the battleship Indomitable, staring at the tactical display with satisfaction. Around him, his crew worked in calm silence, each person focused on their assigned task. The display showed the positions of every human ship in the Outer Rim sector, hundreds of vessels that appeared to be scattered randomly across dozens of systems. But Dae-Jung knew better. There was nothing random about their deployment. "Admiral, we're receiving the transmission from Council Space," his communications officer announced. "Ambassador Lee has delivered the refusal." Dae-Jung allowed himself a small smile. "Good. Execute protocol blackout. All ships begin Phase 1 immediately." Across human space, warships that had been pretending to conduct routine patrols suddenly changed course. Civilian transports that were actually troop carriers began moving toward predetermined coordinates. Mining stations powered up weapon systems that shouldn't exist according to their registration documents. It was all happening exactly as planned. Light years away, in the private chambers beneath the council building, Councillor Thexamar paced back and forth like a caged animal. His scales rattled with agitation as he addressed the other senior councillors. "How dare they? How dare they refuse us? No species has done this in 600 years. They're primitives," said the Aquilon representative, waving a tentacle dismissively. "They've barely left their home system. They have no idea what real power looks like. We've crushed species 10 times their size." The Vexian councillor chimed in agreement. "The humans have 67 colonies. We control systems numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Their defiance is meaningless. We simply proceed to the next phase. Military discipline, a swift strike against their core worlds. They'll beg for protectorate status within a week." Thexmar stopped pacing. "And the evidence they mentioned? The data chip?" "Propaganda," the Aquilon said confidently. "Even if they release it, who would believe them? We control most of the major news networks. Those we don't control can be pressured. By the time anyone investigates their claims, humanity will already be under Trilaxian authority and unable to speak freely." What none of them knew was that Hyon Park was listening to every word. He sat in a maintenance shaft 3 levels below the conference room, his custom-built listening device feeding him their conversation in real time. Yun had been embedded in council infrastructure for 2 years, working as a simple technician while actually serving as humanity's primary intelligence asset. He was very good at being invisible. As the counselors continued their discussion, Yan was already uploading false intelligence reports into the Council's military networks. Reports that showed human colonies defended by minimal forces. Reports that suggested humanity's fleet was outdated and poorly trained. Reports that painted Earth's military as disorganized and unprepared. All lies, of course, but the Council wouldn't discover that until it was too late. The Council meeting ended with a unanimous vote. They would send a fleet to discipline humanity. 3,000 warships representing the combined might of 7 major empires. It would be the largest military operation in 50 years. They would jump to the Talon Nebula, where intelligence suggested humanity had clustered its most valuable colonies. One devastating strike would break human resistance forever. Hyun recorded the entire plan and transmitted it using a tight beam communication system hidden inside a supposedly broken air recycler. The message bounced through 6 relay stations before reaching Earth's Strategic Command 90 minutes later. In the war room beneath Geneva, General Sujin Nam reviewed the incoming intelligence with her staff. The room was designed to survive direct nuclear strikes, though everyone hoped it would never need to.
Right now, it served as the coordination center for humanity's greatest gamble. They're taking the bait, Sujin announced.
3,000 ships heading for Talon Nebula. Estimated arrival in 8 days. Her second-in-command, Colonel Min-ho Song, pulled up the tactical situation. All civilian evacuations from Talon Sector are complete, as of 2 hours ago. The colonies appear inhabited on long-range scans, but everyone is actually safe on the inner worlds. The decoy installations are running perfectly. And our surprises? Sujin asked. Ready and waiting. Commander Sojin Kwan confirms that all special operations teams are in position. Engineer Minseo Bay has finished the last weapons installations. Everything we've been preparing for 5 years is about to pay off. Sujin studied the star map for a long moment. Red icons represented the approaching Council fleet. Blue icons showed human positions that the enemy knew about. Green icons showed human assets that were completely hidden. There were a lot of green icons. They think they're hunting prey, she said quietly. They're about to discover they walked into a trap. Send the final authorization codes to all commands. Make sure every ship commander understands the rules of engagement. We fight smart, not fair. We use every advantage. We show them exactly why threatening humanity was the worst mistake they ever made. Back on the Indomitable, Daijung received his orders with grim satisfaction. He had been a naval officer for 30 years, and he had spent the last 5 preparing for this exact scenario. When humanity discovered the Council's protection racket, they knew conflict was inevitable. So they prepared. They built weapons in secret. They trained in tactics the galaxy considered uncivilized. They studied every Council species, learning their weaknesses and blind spots. The galaxy fought wars according to ancient traditions. Fleets met in open space. Battles followed predictable patterns. Surrender was accepted once a victor was clear. It was all very civilized and orderly. Humanity had read those traditions carefully, and then decided to ignore all of them. Communications, send this message to all human vessels, Daejung ordered. From Admiral Choi. Message begins. They wanted to teach us a lesson. Instead, we're going to teach them. Show no mercy. Take no chances. Use every trick we know. When this is over, the galaxy will understand that humanity doesn't surrender. Message ends. His tactical officer looked up from her console. Sir, I'm showing Council fleet movements consistent with Hyun's intelligence. They're definitely coming to Talon Nebula. They think we're going to be sitting there waiting for them. Let them think that, Daejung said. Let them believe their own intelligence reports right up until the moment we spring the trap. How long until our surprise packages are ready? The Nebula modifications are complete. Every mining drone has been retrofitted with the new systems. All hidden bases are powered up and ready. Strike craft are fueled and armed. We can activate everything on your command, sir. Daejung looked at the countdown timer on his display. 8 days until the Council fleet arrived. 8 days until humanity showed the galaxy what they could really do. He thought about Ambassador Lee standing in that Council chamber, saying no to 847 different species. That took courage. But courage alone wouldn't win this fight. They needed to be smart, ruthless, and unpredictable. Maintain current positions, he ordered. Let them see exactly what they expect to see. When they arrive at Talon Nebula, they should find everything their intelligence reports promise them, right up until the moment we blow their fleet to pieces. The bridge crew responded with quiet efficiency. No one cheered or celebrated. This wasn't a game. Thousands of people would probably die in the coming battle on both sides, but if humanity didn't win this fight, millions would die under Council occupation. There was no choice but to succeed. In orbit around Earth, warship after warship finished final preparations. Crews said goodbye to families via video link, not knowing if they would ever return. Engineers ran final checks on weapons that had never been tested in actual combat. Pilots climbed into fighters, their hands steady despite knowing what was coming. And in the Talon Nebula, thousands of light years away, the trap sat waiting. Silent, deadly, ready to teach the Galactic Council the most important lesson they would ever learn. Never threaten humanity. The Council fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 3,000 warships arranged in the traditional battle pattern that had been used for centuries. In the center, the massive dreadnoughts of the Trilaxian Empire. On the flanks, fast cruisers from 6 other major powers. Everything by the book. Everything according to doctrine that was older than human civilization. Fleet Commander Zaxthos studied his tactical display with satisfaction. The nebula stretched before them, and his sensors clearly showed human colonies scattered throughout the region. Defensive platforms in predictable positions, ships clustered around major installations. Everything his intelligence reports had promised. The humans had no idea they were coming. All ships, standard engagement formation, he ordered. Advance into the nebula. Target military installations first, then civilian infrastructure. We want them broken, not destroyed. They need to be able to surrender. The fleet moved forward into the swirling clouds of gas and dust that made up the Talon Nebula. Visibility was limited, but that's why they had long-range sensors. Zaxthos watched as his ships penetrated deeper, spreading out to envelope the human positions. In another hour, they would be in weapons range. Then, this would all be over. Aboard the human frigate Defiant, Captain Hansol Kim watched the Council fleet walk into his trap. His ship was hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid, completely invisible to enemy sensors. Around him, 200 other vessels waited in similar hiding spots throughout the nebula. The Council was looking for human ships in all the obvious places. They wouldn't find them until it was too late. Weapons ready? Hansol asked quietly. All systems green, his tactical officer responded. Targeting solutions locked for all enemy capital ships in our sector. Good. Wait for Admiral Choi's signal, then we light them up. Deep in the nebula, the Council fleet was starting to notice something wrong. The human colonies they were approaching weren't responding to hails. The defensive platforms weren't powering up. The ships that had been detected earlier weren't moving to engage. It was too quiet. Commander Zaxthos frowned at his displays. Sensors confirm those readings. Why aren't the humans reacting to our presence? Before the sensor operator could respond, every screen in the fleet lit up with a single transmission. It was Captain Kim's face, smiling in a way that made Zaxthos' scales itch. Greetings, Council fleet. Welcome to Talon Nebula. You were expecting to find human colonies here. Sorry to disappoint you. We evacuated everyone 3 weeks ago. What you're seeing on sensors are automated decoys. Very convincing, aren't they? Hansol's smile widened. You came here to teach us a lesson. Instead, you're going to learn one. You picked the wrong species. Signal out. The transmission ended. For exactly 5 seconds, nothing happened. Then the nebula itself seemed to come alive. Thousands of objects that the Council fleet had dismissed as space debris suddenly activated. Mining drones that humanity had been deploying for months, each one now converted into a weapons platform. They weren't powerful individually, but there were so many of them. They swarmed toward the Council ships like angry insects, their small weapons peppering shields and armor. Defensive fire, Zaxthos roared. All ships, engage those drones. Where are they coming from? The answer became clear a moment later when asteroids throughout the nebula split open. Hidden bases that had been built in complete secrecy now revealed themselves. Strike craft poured out in waves, small and fast and dangerous. They ignored all the traditional rules of engagement, attacking from unexpected angles, targeting vulnerable systems using the nebula's gas clouds for cover. And then the real nightmare began. Human warships decloaked all around the Council fleet. They had been there the whole time, hiding behind stealth systems that the galaxy didn't know humanity possessed. They weren't in the positions the Council expected. They were everywhere, surrounding the enemy fleet from all sides. Admiral Daejung gave the order from his flagship. All ships, open fire. Show them what we've built. The human fleet opened up with weapons that made the Council sensors scream warnings. These weren't standard plasma cannons or particle beams. Engineer Mincio Bay had spent years designing something new. Weapons tailored specifically to counter each major Council species. Resonance cannons that shattered Trilaxian armor by exploiting crystalline weaknesses. Acid torpedoes that ate through Aquilon biohulls. EMP bursts calibrated to fry Vexian quantum processors. Every weapon system was designed to hurt one specific enemy as badly as possible. And humanity had brought all of them to this fight. Council ships started dying. Not slowly, not with time to surrender, just dying. Their shields couldn't handle the unexpected weapons types. Their armor cracked under resonance bombardment. Their systems failed as human cyber warfare specialists, hacked into their networks using backdoors that Hyan had planted months ago. Commander Sojin Kwan led the boarding operations. Her teams used tactics that would have horrified any Council military observer. They didn't announce their intentions. They didn't offer chances to surrender. They just breached hulls, stormed, aboard and took control of enemy ships with brutal efficiency. Close-quarters combat training that had been perfected over centuries of human warfare. The galaxy fought wars with honor and tradition. Humanity fought to win. Sojin's team hit a Trilaxian cruiser, blasting through the hull with cutting charges. They moved through the corridors in perfect formation, their weapons barking in sharp bursts. Trilaxian soldiers tried to form defensive positions, but human tactics were too fast, too aggressive, too unexpected. Within 15 minutes, Sojin stood on the cruiser's bridge, the captain at her feet. "Your ship is ours," she said flatly. "Order your crew to stand down or we vent the atmosphere in every section simultaneously. You have 10 seconds. The captain stared at her in shock. "This is barbaric. We are soldiers. There are rules of war." "Your rules," Sojin said coldly. "Not ours. 5 seconds." The captain surrendered. Sojin's team secured the ship and moved on to the next target. They would capture 15 Council vessels before the battle ended. Back on the Indomitable, Admiral Daejung watched the tactical situation with grim satisfaction. The Council fleet was in complete chaos. Their formations had broken apart. Ships were fleeing in all directions trying to escape the trap, but human vessels pursued them relentlessly, hunting them through the nebula like wolves chasing deer. "Casualties?" Daejung asked. 207 personnel killed, 9 ships destroyed, 15 damaged but operational. The enemy has lost over 1,800 vessels with more than 1,000 additional ships disabled or captured. The numbers were staggering. In less than 3 hours, humanity had destroyed more than half the Council fleet, and they had done it while losing barely any forces of their own. It wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. Han Sol's frigate chased down a fleeing Aquilon destroyer, pounding it with concentrated fire until its engines failed. As his crew prepared to board, Han Sol opened a channel to the enemy captain. "You came here to break us, to force us into submission. Did you really think we would just roll over and accept slavery?" The Aquilon's response came in a shaking voice. "What are you? We've fought wars for 10,000 years. We've never seen anything like this. You don't fight like civilized beings. You fight like demons." Han Sol considered that for a moment. "Maybe we do. Or maybe we just fight like people who refuse to lose." "Surrender your ship and we'll spare your crew. Keep fighting and we'll blow you out of space. Your choice." The Aquilon surrendered. Ship after ship made the same decision as the battle wound down. Those who kept fighting died quickly. Those who surrendered were taken prisoner and treated well, despite the Aquilon captain's fears. Humanity fought viciously, but they didn't torture or execute prisoners. They just refused to fight fair. By the time the last Council ship either fled or was destroyed, the Talon Nebula was a graveyard. Wreckage drifted through the gas clouds, slowly breaking apart. Emergency beacons called out from disabled vessels. Human search and rescue teams were already moving to collect survivors. Admiral Daejong stood on his bridge, looking at the aftermath. They had won. Decisively. Completely. But the victory felt heavy. Thousands had died today, most of them council personnel who were just following orders. He didn't enjoy killing. He just refused to let his species be conquered. "Send a message to all surviving council ships," he ordered. "Tell them to return home. Tell them to report exactly what happened here. Tell them that humanity gave you a choice and you chose war. This is what war with us looks like. If they want peace, we're willing to talk. But we'll never surrender. Never." The message went out. The survivors fled, and across the galaxy word began to spread. Humanity had fought the Galactic Council and won. They had used weapons and tactics that the galaxy had never seen. They had shown no mercy to those who threatened their freedom. The Council had wanted to teach humanity a lesson. Instead, they learned one. Never underestimate the species that refuses to quit. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was nothing like the ordered proceedings of weeks past. Representatives shouted at each other across the chamber. Accusations flew in every direction. The careful diplomatic protocols that had governed galactic politics for centuries were crumbling before everyone's eyes. Councillor Thexmar stood at the central podium, his scales flushed dark with rage and embarrassment. "The humans must be destroyed. They have humiliated the Council. They have killed thousands of our soldiers. We cannot allow this insult to stand." "Your soldiers," corrected the Vexian representative, her crystalline body chiming with agitation. "Most of that fleet was Trilaxian. The rest of us lost relatively few ships because we were foolish enough to trust your intelligence reports that were apparently completely wrong." A counselor from the Aquilin Collective rose on his tentacles. "I lost 300 ships because your intelligence said the humans were weak and disorganized. Instead, we walked into a perfectly prepared trap. They knew we were coming. They knew exactly what we would do. How is that possible unless someone leaked our plans?" The chamber erupted into fresh accusations. Species that had been allies for centuries suddenly turned on each other, each one trying to shift blame. In the observation gallery above, Ambassador Jiwoo Lee watched with quiet satisfaction. This was going exactly as planned. Beside her, Taeyang Han was monitoring several data streams on his tablet. Taeyang was humanity's expert in psychology and negotiation, and for the past week, he had been orchestrating the most important information campaign in human history. "The leaks are spreading perfectly," he said quietly. "Every major news network in the galaxy now has copies of the Council's internal documents. The smaller species are starting to realize they've been exploited for centuries." Jiwoo nodded. "How many species have contacted us privately?" 47 so far. Most of them want confirmation that the documents are real. A few are asking if humanity would be willing to help them break free from Council authority. Tell them we'll help anyone who wants genuine freedom, but they need to stand up for themselves. We can't fight everyone's battles. Down in the chamber, the Grand Arbiter was trying desperately to restore order. His energy field pulsed with stress as he amplified his voice. "Enough, we must present a united front. The humans are watching us destroy ourselves from within. This is exactly what they want. Then perhaps we should ask ourselves why they want it," said a new voice. It came from Councillor Vexthar of the Aquilin delegation, a moderate who had served on the Council for 70 years. He had always been known as a voice of reason, and now every eye turned to him. "I have reviewed the documents the humans released. I did not want to believe them. But I have checked them against my own records, against historical archives, against military reports. They are genuine." The chamber fell into shocked silence. Vexthar continued, his voice heavy with disgust. "For 600 years, this council has been running a protection scheme. We identify promising young species. We fabricate evidence of aggression. We force them into protectorate status, and then we exploit them for generations. 43 species have been subjected to this treatment. 43 civilizations stripped of their freedom based on lies. Lies from a human propaganda campaign." Thexmar roared. "You would believe our enemies over your own colleagues?" "I believe evidence," Vexthar said coldly. "I believe documented communications. I believe financial records showing how much wealth the Trilaxian Empire has extracted from its so-called protectorates." I believe military reports proving that every single threat used to justify intervention was either exaggerated or completely fabricated. He turned to face Thexmar directly. And I believe that humanity did something no other species has managed in 6 centuries. They said no. They refused to be victims, and when you tried to punish them for that refusal, they showed you exactly what happens when you underestimate someone's desire for freedom. The chamber erupted again, but this time the shouting had a different character. It wasn't anger at humanity, it was anger at each other. Species who had served as protectors began defending themselves. Species who had been forced into protectorate status began demanding answers. The careful alliance that had held the council together was fracturing. Hyun Park watched it all from his hidden position in the maintenance shafts. He had continued feeding intelligence to Earth even after the battle ended. Now he was documenting everything, recording the council's collapse for historical records. He smiled as he watched Thexmar try to defend himself against accusations from a dozen different species. This was better than any military victory. Over the next 3 weeks, the situation got worse for the council and better for humanity. The evidence Taiyang had released was irrefutable. News networks across the galaxy were reporting on it constantly. Investigation after investigation confirmed what humanity had claimed. The council had been corrupt for centuries, and everyone finally knew it. Species began withdrawing from the council entirely. The Vexian collective was first, announcing that they could not in good conscience remain part of such a corrupt body. The Aquilon Confederation followed 3 days later. Within 2 weeks, 17 major species had either left the council or publicly demanded reform. The smaller species, those who had been forced into protectorate status, began organizing their own coalition. They called it the Independent Systems Alliance, and their charter was simple. No species should rule over another, and all civilizations deserved the right to determine their own futures. Humanity was invited to join as a founding member. Ambassador Lee attended the first meeting of the Alliance on a neutral space station. Representatives from 83 different species were present, many of them speaking freely for the first time in generations. A young delegate from the Terrax people approached Jiwoo with tears in her eyes. "Thank you. We have been under Trilaxian authority for 200 years. We thought we would never be free. You showed us it was possible to say no." Jiwoo clasped the delegate's hand gently. "We showed you that you could fight. But you're the ones who chose to stand up. Never forget that. Freedom isn't given, it's taken." Back at the Galactic Council, the situation was desperate. Only 40% of the original member species remained, and most of those were deeply divided about what to do next. The Trilaxian Empire demanded a full-scale invasion of Earth, mobilizing every ship they had for a war of annihilation. But most other species refused to participate. "We already lost 1 fleet to the humans," the remaining Aquilon counselors argued. "You want to lose another?" "They were ready for us last time. They'll be even more ready now. And this time, we know they won't hesitate to destroy everything we send." The debate raged for days. Eventually, the council fractured completely. The Trilaxian Empire and 6 loyalist species formed a new organization called the Imperial Alliance. The remaining species tried to maintain the old council structure, but it was a hollow shell of its former power. The galaxy's political order, stable for 600 years, had collapsed in less than a month. Dr. Yuna Park watched the developments from Earth's diplomatic center. She had spent years studying galactic civilizations, and she understood better than most how significant this moment was. "This is unprecedented," she told Jiwoo during a video call. "Galactic politics have been frozen for centuries. The same powers maintaining the same control over the same subjects, and then humanity came along and broke everything." "Is that good or bad?" Jiwoo asked. "Both," Yuna said honestly. "We freed a lot of species from oppression. That's wonderful. But we also destabilized the entire galaxy. There's going to be chaos for years, maybe decades. Wars, territorial disputes, power vacuums. Not all of it will be our fault, but some of it will be. So what do? We help where we can. We support the species who want freedom. We make it clear that we're not interested in building our own empire, and we prepare for the fact that the Imperial Alliance isn't going to forgive or forget what we did to them." Jiwoo nodded slowly. She had known this wouldn't be simple. They hadn't just refused the Council's ultimatum. They had torn down the galaxy's entire power structure. That kind of change came with consequences, both good and bad, but she didn't regret it. Not for a second. A month after the Talon Nebula battle, Jiwoo stood before the first assembly of the Independent Systems Alliance. 500 species had sent representatives and thousands more were watching the broadcast across the galaxy. She stepped up to the podium, feeling the weight of what she was about to say. We came to the stars not as conquerors or victims, but as equals. When the Council tried to force us into submission, we refused. Not because we wanted war, not because we wanted power, but because we believed that every species has the right to be free. She paused, looking out at the assembled delegates. The galaxy is changing. The old order is broken. What we build to replace it will define the future for thousands of years. So I'm asking all of you, what kind of galaxy do you want? One where the strong rule the weak? Or one where everyone has a voice? The answer came as thunderous applause. Species who had been silent for centuries were finally speaking up. The galaxy would never be the same, and humanity had made it possible with one simple word: no. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Talon Nebula. The old Galactic Council building still stood, but it was empty now, a monument to a dead era. A few dozen light years away, a new structure was taking shape. The assembly station, they called it. A massive ring-shaped platform where representatives from 500 different species were working to build something that had never existed before. A truly democratic galactic government. Ambassador Jiwoo Lee floated in the zero-gravity observation deck, watching construction crews from a dozen different species work together on the station's outer hull. It was beautiful in a way, seeing people who had been enemies or strangers just months ago now collaborating on a common project. But she also knew how fragile this peace was. Beautiful, isn't it? The voice came from behind her. Jiwoo turned to see Counselor Vexithar drifting into the observation deck. The old Aquilin had become one of humanity's strongest allies over the past months, using his influence to convince wavering species to join the new assembly. Beautiful and terrifying, Jiwoo admitted. We're trying to unite 500 species who have been fighting each other for thousands of years. The odds of success are not great. No, Vexthar agreed. But the alternative is worse. The Imperial Alliance is already raiding independent systems. Without the assembly, those species have no protection. At least this way they have a chance. The Imperial Alliance, as they were now calling themselves, consisted of the Trilaxian Empire and 6 other species who refused to accept the new order. They controlled roughly 15% of the galaxy's inhabited systems, but they were among the most militarily powerful. The Trilaxians in particular were not known for forgiving insults, and humanity had delivered the greatest insult possible. In the Assembly's main conference hall, a debate was raging. Bora Song, humanity's official representative to the Assembly, was presenting what they called the Terran Accords. It was a document that outlined the principles for the new galactic government: equal representation for all species, no forced protectorates, democratic decision-making, protection for minority populations, free trade and free travel. It all sounded simple on paper, but getting 500 different cultures to agree on anything was nearly impossible. The Terran Accords are an insult to tradition, declared the representative from the Korvax Union, a species who had been part of the old council. You cannot simply throw away thousands of years of established protocols. There must be order. There must be hierarchy. Bora kept her voice calm and professional. The old protocols allowed the strong to exploit the weak for 600 years. If that's tradition, then tradition needs to change. We're proposing a system where every voice matters, not just the voices of the powerful. Easy for you to say, another delegate shouted. Your species just destroyed the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. You speak of equality while sitting on the biggest military in this sector. Bora nodded slowly. That's fair criticism. So let me address it directly. Yes, humanity has a strong military. We built it because we had to, because the alternative was slavery. But we have no interest in empire building. We're proposing that the Assembly create a collective defense force, commanded by representatives from multiple species, with strict oversight to prevent abuse. Earth will contribute ships and personnel, but we won't control it. The debate continued for hours. Every species had concerns. Every culture had different traditions. But slowly, painfully, they were finding common ground. It helped that most of the species present had suffered under the old council's protection rackets. They knew what they were trying to avoid, even if they couldn't agree on every detail of what they wanted to build. Dr. Una Park was working in a completely different section of the station, leading what she called the Cultural Exchange Initiative. If the assembly was going to work, species needed to understand each other better. That meant translation services, cultural education programs, exchange student systems, and scientific collaboration. It was a massive undertaking, and Yuna threw herself into it with enthusiasm. The problem isn't that we're different, she explained to a group of young aliens who were training to be cultural liaisons. The problem is that we don't understand our differences. A gesture that means hello to one species might mean I want to fight to another. If we don't learn these things, we'll have conflicts that could have been avoided. One of the students, a young Vexian named Rix, raised a crystalline appendage. But how do we learn about 500 different cultures? There's too much information. It would take lifetimes. It will take lifetimes, Yuna agreed. But we have to start somewhere. And once we start, it gets easier. You learn that most species want the same basic things: safety, prosperity, freedom. Understanding that makes everything else easier to figure out. Meanwhile, in human space, Admiral Daejung Choi was dealing with a different kind of problem. The Imperial Alliance had been testing their defenses with small raids and probing attacks. Nothing major yet, but everyone knew it was just a matter of time before the real war started. The Trilaxians would not let the destruction of their fleet go unpunished. They're learning from their mistakes, Daejung told his staff during a strategy meeting. The raids are being conducted by small, fast ships using hit-and-run tactics. They're not walking into our traps anymore. They're adapting. Commander Sojin Kwan nodded from her seat. That means the next real battle is going to be much harder than Talon Nebula. They know what we can do now. They'll be prepared. Then we need to stay ahead of them, Daejung said. Engineer Bay, what's the status on the new weapon systems? Minseo Bay pulled up a holographic display. We're developing countermeasures to their countermeasures. But it's an arms race now. Every advantage we create, they'll eventually figure out how to neutralize. We can't rely on superior technology forever. Eventually, this will come down to numbers, and they have more ships than we do. Which is why we need the assembly to work, Daejung said. We can't fight the Imperial Alliance alone. We need allies who will actually fight with us, not just offer moral support. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent communication. Captain Han Sol Kim's face appeared on the screen, and he looked worried. Admiral, we have a situation. A Trilaxian fleet just jumped into the Kepler 442 system, 26 warships. They're demanding that the colony there surrender and accept Imperial authority. How many people in that colony? Daejung asked. 40,000. Mixed population. About 30 different species, including 5,000 humans. Daejung made his decision instantly. Deploy the rapid response fleet. I want our ships there in 2 hours. And send a message to the Trilaxians. Tell them that any colony under assembly protection is off limits. If they want war, they'll get war. The battle at Kepler 442 was smaller than Talon Nebula, but it was significant for a different reason. When the human rapid response fleet arrived, they weren't alone. Ships from 12 other assembly species jumped in alongside them. The Vexian Collective sent cruisers. The Aquilan Confederation sent destroyers. Even some of the smaller species contributed what they could. The Trilaxian commander took one look at the combined fleet and retreated without firing a shot. It was a small victory, but it proved something important. The assembly wasn't just talk. Species were willing to fight together to protect each other's freedom. News of the standoff spread across the galaxy. More species began applying to join the assembly. Within 3 weeks, membership had grown from 500 species to 732. The momentum was building, but not everyone was celebrating. In the Imperial Alliance capital, Trilaxian military leaders were planning their response. They had lost face at Kepler 442. That could not be allowed to stand. A larger operation was being prepared, one that would strike at the heart of the assembly and show everyone that the old powers were still dangerous. Jiwoo received warning of the planned attack from Hyun, who was still operating deep in Imperial territory. The message was brief and encrypted. Major offensive planned. Target is assembly station. 3 months. Come home while you can. She shared the intelligence with the assembly leadership immediately. The response was unanimous. They would not abandon the station. If the Imperial Alliance wanted war, they would get it. But this time, the assembly would face them together. Over the next 3 months, the assembly station was transformed into a fortress. Defense platforms were installed. Shield generators were brought online. Multiple species contributed military forces to protect the station, and perhaps most importantly, the member species ratified the Terran Accords by a vote of 693 in favor, 39 against. On the day the vote passed, Bora stood before the assembly with tears in her eyes. Today we proved that different species can come together as equals. We proved that freedom and democracy aren't just human concepts, they're universal values that everyone can embrace. The old council ruled through fear and exploitation. We will build something better, together. The assembly hall erupted in applause. Representatives from hundreds of different species stood and cheered. It was a moment of genuine hope, even as everyone knew that war was coming. When the Imperial Alliance fleet finally arrived 3 months later, they found the assembly ready.